There's a puppy crying outside the church and his paws are bleeding through the snow." That's what my cousin Billy shouted the moment he ran into the community center kitchen, his boots soaked and his breath fogging the air like smoke. I dropped the stack of folding chairs I was hauling to the basement and bolted out the back doors. Billy wasn't the type to exaggerate. If he said there was a dog in trouble, I believed him. Outside, the wind clawed at my face, sharp and dry. The church across the lot stood in quiet contrast, its tall brick walls dusted with snow, its steeple piercing the late January sky. At first I didn't see anything. Then I heard it, a low, pained whimper, like someone trying not to cry. He was curled up right by the wooden doors, a little golden puppy no bigger than a loaf of bread. His fur was matted with soot and dirt, and both his front paws were dark red. Not just red, raw. I could see where the skin had peeled, as though he'd walked across something hot. "Oh, buddy," I whispered as I crouched down. He didn't back away. He didn't even lift his head. He just let out another soft whimper and looked at me with big brown eyes that were dull with pain. Carefully, I slipped my hands under his belly and picked him up. He was lighter than I expected. His fur was warm, but his ears were cold as ice. Billy trailed behind as I carried him inside. "You think someone left him there?" "I don't know," I said, "but we need to get him warm." Our church didn't have a vet kit, but Mrs. Clark, the lady who ran the community center, always kept a stash of emergency supplies. Within minutes, we had the little guy wrapped in a flannel blanket and resting in one of the old choir baskets lined with towels. We poured warm, not hot, water into a bowl and let him sip slowly. I didn't want to touch his paws until someone who knew better could look at him. That's when Pastor Mike walked in, his coat flapping in the wind. "What's going on in here?" "There's a puppy, outside," Billy said. "His paws are burned." Pastor Mike knelt beside me and studied the dog. "I'll call Doc Harland. He owes me a favor." 15 minutes later, the town's retired vet, Dr. Harland, with his white mustache and his green wool coat, walked through the doors carrying a worn leather bag. He didn't ask questions. He just sat on the floor beside the dog and opened his bag. "Well now," he murmured, examining the paws with gentle fingers. "These burns are about a day old. Looks like asphalt or maybe embers. Poor fella's lucky he made it here." "He didn't just make it," I said. "He stayed. He didn't move when we walked up." Dr. Harland gave the pup some pain relief and carefully cleaned the wounds. Then he bandaged them with gauze and medical tape. Through it all, the dog didn't growl or whimper. He just stared at the church doors. "He's watching something," Billy whispered. We all turned. Nothing. Just quiet steps, closed doors, the faint scent of candle wax. "He's not watching," Dr. Harland said after a moment. "He's guarding." It was a strange thing to say, but as the puppy settled into the basket and let out a small sigh, I couldn't shake the thought. He had sat there like a statue in the snow, injured but unmoving, as if he had a purpose. That night, we took him home. I have 2 kids, and my wife Shannon is an easy yes when it comes to animals. We'd fostered before. The kids named him Toby, after the dog from a Christmas movie we watched every year. Toby slept most of that first night. We checked his bandages in the morning. His paws were tender but healing. The kids fed him tiny pieces of boiled chicken, and Shannon made a little bed for him near the fireplace, but something was off. Every time the front door creaked or a car passed, Toby perked up. Not with fear, but with expectation. His eyes lit up, and he turned toward the sound. Then the moment would pass, and his ears would droop. "Is he waiting for someone?" my daughter Lily asked. "I think so," I said. That Sunday, we brought him back to the church with us. We wrapped his paws and let him rest in a blanket-lined basket in the front pew. The whole congregation cooed over him. A few folks asked if he was a rescue. I just said he showed up on our doorstep. After service, he did something strange. Toby hobbled, limping but determined, toward the side garden, the one just past the choir room. It was nothing special, just a patch of grass and snow-covered shrubs, but he went straight to the far corner, right where the bricks met the fence. Then he barked. Once, twice. Then he sat down. We walked over slowly. There, nestled behind a bush, was a small, soot-covered pile. At first it looked like trash, burned rags. But as we moved closer, we saw the shape of a blanket. Shannon crouched down and gasped. "Oh my!" There was a tiny baby, wrapped in smoke-stained fabric, eyes shut, face smudged with ash. Alive. We called 911. The paramedic said she was dehydrated and cold, but stable. They rushed her to the county hospital. Toby had stayed by her side. We found the ashes of what looked like a small fire nearby. Maybe enough to keep her warm for a while. Maybe just enough. "That dog," one of the paramedics said, shaking his head. "He protected her. Probably saved her life." No one claimed the baby. No notes. No signs. Just Toby and his burned paws. After that day, everything changed. The local news showed up, then a reporter from the city. People came to the church to see Toby. Donations poured in for the baby, who the hospital staff had nicknamed Hope. We didn't tell the kids everything, just that Toby had done something brave, that he was special. But I knew. He had stayed in front of those church doors, broken and burned, to protect something bigger than himself. And maybe, just maybe, he'd found a home too. 2 weeks after Toby led us to that baby, things hadn't quieted down one bit. If anything, they'd only grown louder. Our little town of Harpersville wasn't used to attention. It was the kind of place where folks waved from porches, and the biggest news in the paper was usually about the high school football team. But now reporters kept showing up, cameras flashing, always wanting a shot of Toby curled by the church or being held by one of the kids. They asked him questions like he was going to talk. But Toby didn't seem to care much for fame. He tolerated the visitors, but his eyes always stayed on the corners of the room, like he was watching for something that hadn't arrived yet. Hope, the baby, was still at County General. She was growing stronger by the day. Shannon visited her every few afternoons, helping rock her to sleep while the nurses took their breaks. The hospital was working with child services to find her a home, but I already knew what my wife was thinking. She hadn't said it yet, but I saw it in the way she came home quieter than usual, her hand smelling faintly of baby powder and formula. I didn't mind the idea. Our kids were older now. Lily was 10 and Max was 13, and they adored Toby already. I could see the thought playing out in Shannon's mind, the pieces clicking into place. One afternoon, while Shannon was at the hospital and the kids were at school, I took Toby for a walk around town. His paws were still healing, but he managed a slow, careful trot along the sidewalk. Every few steps he'd pause and sniff, then glance behind us like he was checking our 6. I couldn't help smiling. "Still guarding something, huh, bud?" I said. We passed the hardware store, the diner, and the little bookstore by the post office. Everyone waved. A few folks stopped to say hi, offer Toby a treat, or thank me for what we'd done, even though it had all been him. As we neared the church, Toby's ears perked. He stopped in his tracks and stared across the street. A boy about 16 was sitting on the curb, his arms wrapped around his knees. He wore a frayed jacket and dirty sneakers. There was something about him. Lost, but not scared. Like someone who had expected to be alone. Toby tugged the leash. Not hard, but firm. He wanted to cross. "All right," I muttered, checking for cars before we moved over. As we approached, the boy looked up. His eyes were pale blue, his face sharp and thin. He couldn't have been from around here. I knew every kid in Harpersville. "Hey," I said. "You okay, son?" He nodded, too quickly. "Need a place to warm up? The community center's open and the church kitchen's got coffee." "I'm fine," he said, then looked at Toby. "That your dog?" "Sort of. He found us more than we found him." The boy reached out slowly. Toby sniffed his hand, then pressed his head into the boy's palm. That was rare. Toby didn't usually trust strangers. "You know him?" I asked, watching his face. The boy hesitated. "Not really." But there was something in his voice, a flicker. Toby stayed by his side. I crouched a little, trying to get a better look at his expression. "You from around here?" "No, just passing through." "You got family? Anyone we can call?" He looked down. "Don't think so." Toby licked the boy's hand. Then he did something strange. He backed up, sat down, and looked at me like he was asking permission. I sighed. "All right, why don't you come with us? We've got soup and heat. No pressure, just warm up, get your bearings." The boy didn't argue. He followed us quietly, one hand still resting on Toby's back. When we got to the church, I led him to the kitchen. Pastor Mike was there, wiping down counters. "This is," I started. "Ty," the boy said. "Well, Ty, this is Pastor Mike. Don't worry, he doesn't make sermons during lunch." Pastor Mike chuckled and poured a bowl of chicken noodle soup, slid it across the counter. Ty hesitated, then picked up the spoon. "Where you headed?" Pastor Mike asked gently. Ty shrugged. "Nowhere, I guess." After he ate, we let him rest a bit in the back lounge. Toby curled beside him and closed his eyes. For once, he seemed at peace. That night, Shannon and I talked. "He's barely more than a kid," she said. "And you think Toby knew him?" "I think Toby recognized something. A scent, maybe, or a feeling." "And hope?" she asked. I looked at her. "You want to bring her home?" She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Within the week, Child Services reached out. They had heard about us, about how we found her. After a lengthy conversation, background checks, and a home visit, we were listed as potential foster parents. Nothing was official yet, but wheels were turning. Ty stayed in town. Pastor Mike let him sleep in the youth room at the church, and Dr. Harland gave him a physical. No major health issues. Just someone a little bruised by life. One night, Ty and I sat on the church steps. Toby lay between us, breathing slow and even. "You know the baby, don't you?" I asked. He flinched just slightly. "You don't have to say how. I'm not here to interrogate you. I just want to know if you're okay." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "She's my sister." I nodded slowly. I figured. "Our mom left weeks ago. I tried to keep things together, but the apartment caught fire. I got her out, but we didn't have anywhere to go. I thought the church would be safe. I tried to build a fire behind the bushes. I stayed as long as I could." "You left her with the dog." "He found us the night before. Just walked up like he knew us. When I had to go find food, I told him to stay, to watch her. And he did. He rubbed his eyes. I came back, but you were already there. I thought maybe it was better that way. Maybe she'd have a chance. I looked at the boy sitting beside me, shoulders hunched, cheeks still too thin. She does, and so do you. Toby lifted his head, eyes moving between us. You trusted him, I said. He didn't let you down. Ty looked at the dog and whispered, he didn't. We didn't say anything else for a long time, just sat there under the stars, the soft sounds of the town humming around us. The next day, Shannon brought Hope home. It was temporary, for now, but our house filled with the sounds of tiny cries and the rustle of diapers again. Lily and Max were obsessed. They took turns holding her bottle, reading her board books, singing her lullabies. And Toby stayed close. He followed her everywhere. When she cried, he'd trot over and sit nearby. When she laughed, he wagged his tail. Ty started spending more time at our place, too. He helped with chores, raked leaves, even fixed a squeaky hinge on the back gate. He still didn't talk much, but he didn't have to. His actions filled in the blanks. Sometimes I'd catch him watching Hope, eyes soft, face unreadable. She's okay, I said one evening. I know, he replied. Because of him. He meant Toby. We all did. The town kept buzzing, but we found our rhythm. A boy trying to rebuild, a baby finding comfort, a dog who wouldn't stop watching the door. I didn't know what the next chapter would bring, but I could feel it in the air. Something big was still coming. Toby knew it too. You could see it in the way he stood at the edge of the porch every night, head tilted, ears flicking at distant sounds, like he was waiting or preparing. And somehow, we were too. On the first Saturday of February, Toby barked twice at the kitchen window and didn't stop until I followed him to the front porch. He hadn't barked like that since he'd led us to Hope. It was the kind of bark that came from deep in his chest. Not scared, not angry, just urgent, like he was trying to speak. I stepped outside, tightening my jacket. Snow dusted the ground again, light and flaky like powdered sugar. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I followed Toby's eyes to the road. A dark-colored sedan sat parked along the curb. The engine was off. The windows were tinted. It had no front plates. A man stepped out. He wore a dark wool coat and leather gloves, the kind of outfit that didn't match small-town Harpersville. He moved slow, like he didn't want to scare anyone, but there was something in the way he scanned the porch and the driveway that made me uneasy. Toby growled, low and quiet. The man walked up the path and stopped a few feet from the porch. Mr. Delaney? That's me. My name's Carl Bishop. I'm with the county. Child services? Not exactly. May I come in? Depends on what this is about. He looked past me to the living room window where Hope's bassinet sat beside the couch. I'm here regarding the baby. Toby stood between us, unmoving. I stepped forward. You're gonna have to be a lot more specific. He reached into his coat, slowly so I wouldn't get the wrong idea, and pulled out a folder. Inside was a letterhead I didn't recognize, and a photo of a woman. Brown hair, sunken cheeks, eyes tired beyond her years. This is Madison Blake, he said. She came into a shelter 3 days ago in Charleston. She claims the baby is hers. I said nothing. She gave a detailed account, described the church, the fence, the fire, said she left the baby in the care of her son while she searched for help. Then she says she lost track of them. Ty, I said softly. He nodded. We've spoken to him. Where is she now? Under supervision, She's in recovery, been through a lot, but she passed a preliminary background check and submitted to a DNA test. We're waiting on confirmation. Toby didn't growl again, but he didn't sit either. I crossed my arms. So what happens now? We evaluate custody. If she's telling the truth, if she's stable, it's possible she'll be given a caseworker, a plan for reunification. And if not, she won't get near that child. I nodded, unsure what to say. I know this is hard, Carl said, voice lower now. From what I've read, you and your wife have been taking wonderful care of the baby. We're not here to break that up. We're here to make sure it's right. He handed me a business card. I'll be in touch when we get the test results. He turned and walked back to the car. Toby watched every step. Shannon came out onto the porch behind me. Who was that? I handed her the folder. That night, we sat by the fire after the kids had gone to bed. Hope was sleeping in her bassinet, one arm curled above her head. Toby lay near her, paws twitching like he was dreaming. Shannon didn't speak for a long time. Then she said, "Do you think it's really her?" "I don't know. But Ty never mentioned a name. Maybe he was protecting her. Or maybe he didn't think she'd come back." The silence settled around us again. The next day, I took Ty for a walk. We didn't talk much, just kicked snow and listened to the wind. After a few blocks, I asked him, "Did you know your mom came forward?" He stopped walking. "Yeah." "You think she's ready?" He hesitated. "I don't know. She wants to be. She's trying." "Do you want her to get Hope back?" He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "I want Hope to be safe." I nodded. "So do we." He looked at me, eyes hard to read. "You'd let her go, wouldn't you? If it was best for her." "Yes," I said, "even if it hurt." Ty didn't reply, but something in his posture relaxed. Later that week, Carl called. The DNA match was confirmed. Madison was Hope's mother. Shannon cried. Quietly, not because she was angry, but because she was scared. For Hope, for Ty, for what came next. A hearing was scheduled. We were asked to attend. On the morning of the hearing, the town came out in a way I hadn't expected. Neighbors dropped off cards. Mrs. Clark brought over a batch of muffins. Pastor Mike said a prayer with us in the driveway. Toby rode with us in the back seat. The kids stayed with friends. Ty asked to come too. At the courthouse, we sat on one side of the room, Madison on the other. She looked smaller than her picture. Her hair was clean but thin, her eyes ringed with worry. When they brought Hope into the room, she let out a tiny squeak, then settled into Shannon's arms. Madison didn't cry, but her lip trembled. The judge asked for statements. I spoke. Shannon did too. Then Ty stood up. He walked to the center of the room, hands in his pockets. "I don't think my mom's a bad person. She's just been through stuff. But Hope doesn't know her. She knows them." He nodded at us. "She's happy. And Toby, he picked them. That means something." The room was quiet. Even the court clerk paused her typing. The judge nodded slowly. "We'll consider everything. This isn't about punishment. It's about stability. Safety." He adjourned the session. Outside, the air felt heavier. Madison walked over. "She's beautiful," she said. "She is," Shannon replied. Madison looked at Ty. "You doing okay?" He nodded. She looked at me then. "I just want her to have a chance, even if it's not with me." Toby stepped closer and touched his nose to her hand. She flinched, then slowly let him rest his head against her palm. "I remember him," she whispered. "He was there. He didn't leave." "No," I said. "He didn't." That night, we waited. A call would come within the week, they said. Toby stayed by the front door. Every now and then, he'd glance at the bassinet, then back at the door, like he was preparing again, like he knew there was more ahead. The call came on a Thursday morning while I was changing Hope's diaper. Toby was lying on the rug, nose on his paws, watching us the way he always did, silent, still, like the world depended on his awareness of every move she made. Shannon answered the phone in the kitchen. I heard her voice catch, then fall into a hush. She didn't say much, just a soft, "I understand. Thank you." I carried Hope into the room and met her eyes. "They ruled in favor of continued foster care," she said. "Madison isn't getting custody, not now." Hope cooed at just the right moment, as if offering her own stamp of approval. "She's going to be part of a monitored reunification plan," Shannon added. "She'll get supervised visits, and they'll reassess in 6 months." I nodded. I didn't feel victory, just relief, tangled with uncertainty. This wasn't over. But for now, we had time. For now, Hope stayed with us. When Ty got home from school, he sat on the back porch with Toby and didn't say anything for nearly an hour. I joined them, sat on the step beside him. "She's still her mom," he said at last. "I know. But you're her family too. And Toby, he never left her side." He looked down at the dog. "Do you think he knows it's not over?" "I think he knows what's worth staying for." In the days that followed, things settled in small ways. Shannon returned to part-time work at the library, and I took over morning duty with Hope. Lily and Max had adjusted to their new routine, splitting their afternoons between homework and taking turns holding the baby like a porcelain doll. And Toby never changed. If anything, his sense of purpose grew stronger. He started sleeping closer to Hope's crib, even positioning himself between her and the front door when we had visitors. He liked routine. Same walks, same blanket, same sunspot by the window. But he was always alert, always ready. One afternoon in early March, we had an unexpected visitor. Pastor Mike pulled into the driveway with a woman we didn't recognize. She was tall, older, with gray streaks in her hair and a notepad in her hand. She wore a navy coat and a pin that said State Animal Services. "This is Ms. Randall," Pastor Mike said. "She's here about Toby." I stepped forward, heart slowing. "What about him?" "He's come up in quite a few news stories," she said gently. "We just want to check a few things." "He's not in trouble, is he?" Shannon asked. "Not at all," she said quickly. "We're just trying to understand where he came from. His microchip doesn't register. He's not licensed anywhere in the state. We want to make sure he wasn't reported missing or taken from someone who's still looking for him." We invited her inside. Toby didn't bark, but he sat by Hope's crib and didn't move. Ms. Randall knelt down and let him sniff her hand. "He seems attached to you all," she said. "Very centered and protective." "We didn't find him," I said. "He found us." We told her everything, from the day he appeared at the church to the burned Paws to Hope. She took notes, nodded thoughtfully, then stood. "There's something unusual about this dog," she said. "I've worked with service animals, therapy dogs, search and rescue units. He's got traits I've only seen in trained dogs, but there's no official record of him anywhere." "Maybe he's just one of a kind," Shannon offered. Ms. Randall smiled. "Maybe. I'd like to keep his file open just in case anyone comes forward, but off the record, he's where he belongs." As they left, Pastor Mike lingered on the porch. "There's more to that dog than luck," he said. I've seen him with the kids, with the church members. He knows who's hurting. He knows who needs him." "I think you're right," I said. And yet something started to shift in Toby. Subtle at first. He grew restless during the evenings. He would stand by the window longer, ears perked. Sometimes he wouldn't settle for bed until he'd paced the perimeter of the house. One night, I woke up to find him staring at the front door, unmoving. "You okay, boy?" I whispered. He turned and looked at me, eyes clear, steady. Then he returned to Hope's side. 3 days later, we found out why. I was at the grocery store with Max when my phone rang. It was Shannon, her voice tight. "There's a man outside, says he knows the dog." My heart sank. "Did you call the sheriff?" "She's on her way. I don't want to say anything until you get here." We rushed home. The man was still there, leaning on a black pickup, wearing a canvas jacket and a faded baseball cap. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Lean frame, sun-beaten skin. Toby stood behind the storm door, tail stiff, not wagging. I parked and stepped out. "You're the one claiming to know this dog?" He nodded slowly. "Name's George Ellis. I raised him." Shannon joined me. "He doesn't have a name. Not that we knew. I called him Boone, got him as a pup, trained him for SAR work." "Search and rescue?" He nodded. "Lost him a year ago during a wildfire. Thought he was gone." Toby didn't move. "I saw him in the paper last month, wasn't sure. But then I saw the scar on his paw in a close-up photo. He got that falling through a woodpile during a training run." I looked at Shannon, then at Toby. The sheriff pulled up then. She greeted us and took George's statement. He seemed calm, sincere, not demanding. "I don't want to take him if he's settled," George said. "I just wanted to know he was alive." Inside the house, Toby sat still, watching. Shannon stepped in, opened the door. Toby walked out slowly. He sniffed the air, approached George, and sat down. Then he turned, walked back to the porch, and nudged the door with his nose. "Guess that's his answer," George said softly. The sheriff nodded. "Looks like he's chosen." We offered George coffee. He stayed an hour, told us about Boone's training, how he used to work natural disaster zones, how he had once found a missing boy under rubble after a landslide. Toby sat beside Hope the entire time, like the conversation was about someone else. Before he left, George knelt and scratched behind Toby's ears. "You did good, Boone," he whispered. "Real good." Then he stood, nodded to us, and left. That night, Toby curled into a tight ball by Hope's crib and didn't stir until morning. I think he finally slept easy, knowing his past had caught up, and still let him stay. Spring came late that year. It was April before the snow fully melted, and the stubborn chill lifted from Harpersville. By then, the town had settled into a rhythm with our strange new normal. Ty living part-time with us, Madison's visits supervised at the courthouse once a week, and Boone, pacing the edge of every gathering like the quiet guardian he'd always been. But we never called him Boone. Not once. George had said the name only a few times that day, and though Toby had clearly remembered him, he hadn't responded to it. Not really. It was as if that name belonged to a past version of himself, someone he no longer was. To us, he was still Toby. The dog who waited outside a church with burned paws and refused to move until someone found the baby he was guarding. The courthouse visits with Madison were structured and quiet. Hope didn't cry, but she didn't light up the way she did with Shannon or the kids. Madison tried. She came early, dressed neat, always bringing a new toy or a book. But there was a distance, a gap neither of them knew how to cross yet. Ty went with her a few times. He'd hold Hope on his lap and help his mom interact. It softened her. You could see it. But still, when the hour ended and the social worker picked up Hope, she always turned her head toward Shannon's arms. We didn't talk about adoption out loud. Not yet. It was too soon, too uncertain. But the idea lingered around the corners of our house like sunlight filtering in through old curtains. One Thursday evening, after dinner, Lily ran into the living room with her school flyer. "We're doing Pet Hero Day next week," she said, eyes bright. "They said we can bring pictures and tell the class about a pet who helped someone." She glanced at Toby. He was stretched out on the rug, paws crossed, watching Max build something with Legos. "Can I talk about him?" she asked. Shannon smiled. "Of course you can. He's the best hero we've ever met." Lily grinned and raced to the kitchen to work on her project. A few days later, I walked into her room to find her carefully pasting photos onto a poster board. There were 4 of them. The first one was of Toby on the porch that first week, bandages still on his paws. The second was him lying beside Hope's crib. The third was of Ty walking with him at the park. And the fourth was a drawing she'd made of Toby standing in front of the church. "Can I read you what I'm going to say?" she asked. "Sure." She cleared her throat. "This is Toby. He is my dog. But before he was ours, he saved a baby. He stayed with her all night outside in the snow until someone found them. Toby never gave up. That's why he's my hero." She looked up at me. "Do you think that's good?" I nodded. "It's perfect." That Monday, after school, Lily came home with a shiny blue ribbon and a chocolate bar from her teacher. "They said it made people cry," she said proudly. Shannon kissed her forehead. "Sometimes tears mean you said something real." That weekend, we went to the park. It was warm enough for short sleeves, and the grass had finally turned green. Hope sat on a blanket, babbling to herself, while Shannon read beside her. Ty played catch with Max near the baseball diamond. Lily had brought her sketch pad and was drawing Toby near the pond. I tossed a stick for him. He chased it, but didn't pick it up. Instead, he turned and trotted toward the trees that bordered the far side of the park. "Where are you going, bud?" I called. He paused near a maple tree and sniffed the air. Then he barked. Once, sharp and clear. Shannon looked up. "Is he okay?" I was already walking toward him. As I got closer, I heard something. A soft rustle, followed by a low moan. Behind the tree, hidden in the underbrush, was a man. He was lying on his side, clutching his stomach. Dirt covered his jeans, and his eyes were barely open. "Sir, can you hear me?" I asked, kneeling. The man groaned. "Toby found someone," I shouted back. Ty and Max came running. I pulled out my phone and called 911. Toby sat beside the man, head low, nose close, like he was trying to let him know he wasn't alone. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later. The man was barely conscious, but alive. They said he'd likely collapsed from dehydration and had been out there overnight. "Your dog might have saved him," one of them said. I looked at Toby. Of course he did. Later that night, we told the story at dinner. Lily wrote it in her journal. Ty said it reminded him of the fire, of the night Toby stayed when no one else could. "Maybe that's who he is," Ty said. "He's not just ours, he's on call." "Like a furry paramedic," Max added, grinning. Shannon laughed, but there was something thoughtful in her eyes. We didn't know it then, but that rescue wasn't the last one. Over the next 2 months, it happened 3 more times. Once, Toby alerted the staff at the community center when an elderly woman passed out in the bathroom. Another time, he refused to leave the side of a boy who'd fallen off his bike and broken his arm. And once, during a church service, he quietly left the sanctuary, barked until someone followed him, and led them to a homeless man asleep and shivering behind the shed. Every time, it was the same. Toby noticed before anyone else. Toby acted while others hesitated. Word spread. Folks in town began calling him the Watcher. Someone even made a little wooden plaque and hung it on the gate outside our yard. It said, "Toby's Post, where the guardian rests." He didn't mind the attention, but he didn't crave it either. He just kept doing what he did. Watching, guarding, loving. Hope started crawling in late May. The first time she reached out to touch Toby's tail, he stayed perfectly still. Eyes soft, tail wagging gently. She giggled and tugged, and he nuzzled her cheek. "Bound for life, those two," Shannon said. Ty was doing better, too. His grades had gone up. He'd joined the after-school carpentry club. We'd found him a quiet mentor at the hardware store who taught him how to repair hinges and fix old locks. Sometimes I'd see him sitting on the porch with Toby, just talking. Not about anything specific, just sharing space, as if he was pouring out all the words he didn't know how to give anyone else. One night he said something that stuck with me. "You think people are born with purpose?" he asked. "I think some people grow into it," I said, "or get led to it." He nodded. "Like Toby." Exactly like Toby. He looked at me. "What if I don't know mine yet?" "You will. You've already started." I meant it. The school year ended, and the days stretched longer. Summer was coming. And though nothing had been said yet, no final decisions, no paperwork filed, I had a feeling our story was still unfolding, moving toward something bigger, something neither we nor Toby could fully see yet. But Toby? He was ready. He always had been. By the time summer arrived in full, Harpersville had come to see Toby as more than just a pet. He was something else. A quiet sentinel, an emblem of everything decent and hopeful. Kids would wave to him from bicycles. Old folks would leave scraps by their fences, hoping he'd trot by. Even the mayor once referred to him in a speech as our four-legged first responder. But none of that changed the way Toby acted at home. He never carried himself like a hero. He didn't bask in praise or expect anything special. He'd still nudge open the screen door every morning at 7 to follow Max to the mailbox. Still curl up beside Hope's crib every night without fail. Still wait by the kitchen doorway during breakfast, alert but calm, ears occasionally twitching when someone scraped a chair or poured juice too loud. It was June 14th when the letter came. Shannon found it in the mailbox, a manila envelope from the county, addressed to both of us. She didn't open it on the porch. She waited until we were inside, until the kids were in the backyard with Ty and Hope was taking her nap. I was setting lunch on the table when she held it out to me. "It's from the family court," she said. We opened it together. Inside was a summary of the latest custody evaluation. The letter stated that Madison Blake had shown progress in her supervised visits, but had not yet demonstrated sufficient stability to regain custody. It also stated that, per our status as active foster guardians, and based on consistent home evaluations, we were now being considered for long-term guardianship, with a recommendation for adoption if the situation remained unchanged for 6 more months. Shannon covered her mouth, eyes wide. "She's still hers," I said softly. "I know," she whispered, "but she's ours too." We didn't tell the kids right away, not because we didn't want them to know, but because we understood how delicate it all still was. Anything could change. We knew that. So did Toby. That night, when we took him out for his walk, he didn't tug or bark or chase any sounds. He just stayed close to our sides, eyes darting every now and then to the shadows, the quiet edges of the sidewalk where the streetlights didn't reach. Hope had started walking, in her own wobbly way. She clung to furniture like it was scaffolding, giggling with every successful step. Toby was her shadow. When she teetered, he moved beneath her, just enough to break a fall. When she crawled too fast toward the patio, he trotted ahead, blocking her path with his body until someone could scoop her up. One morning, I found Lily sitting in the front yard with her sketch pad again. "What are you drawing?" I asked. "Toby and Hope," she said. "But not now. In the future." She showed me. The drawing was rough but sweet. Toby, older and grayer, lying on a blanket while a bigger version of Hope read a book beside him. "You think he'll still be around then?" she asked. I looked out toward the porch where he sat watching us. "I think he'll stick around as long as he's needed." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. 4th of July came with its usual excitement. Our neighborhood block party stretched 3 houses wide, with music, barbecue, and the loud pops of fireworks that echoed across the lake. We tried to keep Hope inside once the fireworks started. She wasn't a fan of loud noises yet, but Toby refused to leave her side. When the first boom sounded, she flinched, and he gently rested his head on her lap, calming her. Around 9:30, just as the finale started, Toby stood up and barked once. Then again. It wasn't panic, but it wasn't casual either. I followed his gaze. Across the street, behind the picnic tables, a man had collapsed. People were crowding around him, unsure what to do. Toby ran. I shouted for someone to call 911 and sprinted after him. By the time I reached the man, Toby was already at his side, pressing gently against his chest. The man was breathing, but barely. A neighbor said he'd been dizzy earlier, complaining about chest pain. He hadn't wanted to ruin the party. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They stabilized him, loaded him onto a stretcher, and confirmed later it had been a mild heart attack. The doctor told his wife that if someone hadn't responded immediately, it could have been much worse. Toby returned to Hope's side once it was over. The next day, I brought him a hamburger patty from the leftovers. He sniffed it once, then walked past it and lay back down beside the crib. "You really don't want a medal, huh?" I asked. He blinked slowly, then closed his eyes. Later that week, I took him to the vet for a checkup. Dr. Harland still volunteered part-time, and he did a full exam. "He's healthy," he said. "Maybe a little more tired than before, but that's natural." "Is he slowing down?" I asked. Dr. Harland shrugged. "Not yet, but he's got miles on him. Doesn't matter how strong they are, eventually every protector has to rest." I nodded. "We'll let him decide when that is." Back at home, Ty had just come back from the hardware store. He'd been working on fixing an old rocking chair that the church was going to throw out. He set it on the porch and invited me to sit. "Pastor Mike said I could keep it," he said. "I thought it'd be nice for Hope." "You're turning into quite the craftsman." He smiled faintly. "I like fixing stuff." I looked at him. Really looked. The boy who had shown up skinny, quiet, weighed down by too many things. Now he stood taller, eyes clearer, purpose in his hands. "Thanks for giving me time," he said. "You didn't need us to fix you," I replied. "You just needed room to grow." He nodded, watching as Toby came to lie beside the chair, Hope crawling toward him. In that moment, nothing needed to be said. But even in peace, life has a way of circling, of reminding you that stories don't move in straight lines. One evening, as the sun dipped below the edge of town and turned everything gold, Madison arrived for a scheduled visit. But this time, she wasn't alone. A man was with her, broad-shouldered, quiet, mid-30s, clean clothes, steady eyes. They said he was a counselor from her recovery program, that he'd been supporting her for months. Shannon and I stood in the driveway, Hope in my arms, Toby by our side. "We don't want to cause a scene," Madison said. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything." Hope didn't reach for her, but she didn't cry either. "She's doing so well," Madison said softly. "She's got people looking out for her," Shannon replied. The man stepped forward. "We're not here to push anything, just to let you know Madison's stable. She's applied for part-time work, she's attending meetings, and she understands what the court expects. We want what's best for Hope," Madison said. Toby stood and walked up to her. He looked up for a moment, then gently licked her hand. Just once. She smiled, eyes damp. "I know. You always have." They didn't stay long, just a few minutes, but something shifted. After they left, Shannon turned to me. "If it comes to it, do you think we could let her go?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Because love, when done right, never feels like ownership. It feels like open hands. But I looked at Toby. He was already walking back toward Hope, tail swaying slightly, ears flicking to the sounds of the coming dusk. And I knew, whatever happened next, he'd be ready. The summer deepened in quiet ways. By mid-July, the sun clung to the sky until nearly 9, and the neighborhood buzzed with sprinkler arcs, ice cream trucks, and the faint whir of lawnmowers. Hope had taken to toddling barefoot in the backyard, her stubby legs wobbling with determination. Toby never left her side. He paced when she paced, paused when she fell, and licked her fingers gently whenever she fussed. Ty had taken on a part-time job at the hardware store. He rode his bike there every morning, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and came home smelling like sawdust and oil. He was quieter than ever, but not in a sad way. Just settled, focused, like he'd built something inside himself that didn't need explaining. One Monday, Shannon and I sat down at the kitchen table to fill out the preliminary paperwork for adoption. It wasn't a final decision yet, not until the courts gave us the green light, but it was the first real step. Shannon read every line twice. Her fingers trembled as she signed. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded. "It just feels so permanent, not in a bad way, just deep." Across the room, Toby was lying on the tile floor beneath Hope's high chair. She was dropping Cheerios one by one, and he was catching every single one without moving anything but his mouth. That weekend, the county held a family fair at the Civic Park, an event for foster families and adoptive parents to connect, share stories, and let the kids run wild in a safe space. We packed a picnic, grabbed sun hats, and loaded up the car. Toby sat in the back seat with Lily, head resting on the edge of her knee. The park was crowded when we arrived, but peaceful. No blaring music, just cheerful chatter and kids laughing. Hope squealed the moment we set her down in the grass, crawling toward a cluster of toddlers playing with chalk. Toby followed at a polite distance, watching the other children with a calm, almost diplomatic air. As the kids scattered across the park, Shannon and I joined a circle of other parents under a shady oak tree. Folding chairs had been set up in a loose circle. Someone passed around iced tea and muffins. Everyone was sharing their stories. A woman beside us was in her 50s, sun-wrinkled and warm-eyed. She spoke about her 2 adopted sons, now both grown, who had come to her from different families, but who had become brothers in every way that mattered. "You love who you raise," she said, then smiled at Toby. "And sometimes you love who raises you." Everyone turned to look at him. He was sitting beside Hope, eyes following her hands as she clumsily tried to stack plastic cups. Another dad, tall and quiet, nodded. "That's the dog from the story, right? The one who found the baby?" I nodded. "My daughter keeps his picture on her wall," he said. "Says he's her favorite superhero." Shannon laughed gently. "He's ours too." Later that afternoon, while Shannon helped set up the crafts booth and the kids were off painting flower pots, Ty and I sat on a bench beneath the elm trees. He watched the crowd for a long time before saying, "You think she remembers?" "Hope?" He nodded. "The night it happened. The cold. The fire. Me leaving her?" I thought about it. Maybe not in words, but I think people carry feelings, even if they don't know why. "She doesn't cry around me," he said. "But she doesn't reach for me either." "She doesn't reach for many people," I said. "She reaches for Toby. And for Shannon. And she smiles when you walk into the room. That counts." He nodded, still watching. "I used to think leaving her was the worst thing I ever did," he said. "But maybe it saved her." "You didn't leave her," I said. "You left her with Toby." That night, when we got home, Hope fell asleep on the car ride. Shannon carried her in. Ty followed behind, carrying her diaper bag. Toby trotted in last, paused at the front door, and gave the night air one last, long look before entering. We had barely unpacked when the phone rang. It was the courthouse. I answered on speaker. Shannon stood beside me. The voice on the line was from our caseworker. "We wanted to let you know there's been a new update. Madison Blake has officially withdrawn her petition for custody." Shannon's hand flew to her mouth. I squeezed the edge of the counter. "She signed the paperwork this afternoon," the woman continued. "She cited your stable environment and said she believed you could give Hope the life she needed." I couldn't speak. "She'll still be allowed to send letters if she chooses," the voice went on. "But there will be no further hearings." After we hung up, Shannon leaned against the counter, tears slipping silently down her face. "She chose us," she whispered. "She really chose us." Ty stood in the hallway, his expression unreadable. I walked over, placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" He gave a slow nod. "She did the right thing." Hope stirred in the other room. Toby looked up, ears alert. That night, Shannon and I sat on the back porch, the sky wide and orange with dusk. Hope was asleep upstairs. The kids were watching a movie inside. Toby lay at our feet. "Do you think he knows?" Shannon asked. "He always knows," I said. She reached down and stroked his head. "I wonder what that does to a heart, to carry that kind of responsibility. I think it makes it deeper and heavier, but also fuller." She smiled softly. "Sounds like parenting." Toby rolled onto his side, tail thumping once against the porch. As the sun dipped lower, fireflies blinked in the tall grass. In the distance, someone's wind chimes stirred, and inside the house, the future, shaky and beautiful and still uncertain, waited to unfold, one heartbeat at a time. Toby would be ready. We all would. August brought with it a dry heat that clung to the skin and turned every patch of shade into a sanctuary. The days seemed to stretch longer than usual, marked by the soft whir of fans, the smell of cut grass, and the regular ping of the kids' laughter bouncing off backyard fences. Hope had started stringing together 2-word phrases. Most of them were sweet nonsense. "Toby, come. Book now. Juice, please." But every time she said his name, it was with a kind of reverence, like she knew he'd answer even if he didn't always come right away. He was her constant, her anchor, her shadow. Ty started his sophomore year of high school a week earlier than the other kids because of an orientation program. He'd grown taller over the summer, his voice dropping and his limbs stretching into something steadier. He wore his new backpack like it weighed less than it should. He even agreed to let Shannon take a photo of him by the porch, an annual tradition for the kids. Toby sat beside him in the picture, head slightly tilted, like he knew it was a moment worth remembering. That week also marked the first time Toby hesitated to stand. It was early morning. I'd just poured my coffee, and he was lying beside the kitchen table, chin on his paws. When I called him to follow me outside, he tried to get up and winced. It was small, barely a flinch. But I saw it. I crouched down beside him. "You all right, buddy?" He stood slowly, shook it off, and walked to the door. He made it all the way to the porch steps before pausing again. That afternoon, I took him to Dr. Harland. The old vet ran his hands gently along Toby's spine and limbs, checking joints and pressure points. "Might be arthritis starting in the hips," he said. "Not unusual, considering his age and history. You say he still goes for walks? Twice a day, slow ones. Keep it that way. Let him tell you what he can handle. He's earned the right to take it easy." I nodded. "I just don't want him in pain." "He's not. Not yet, but pay attention. You'll know when something changes." Back at home, Toby lay in the sunroom, his breathing steady. Hope brought him her stuffed rabbit, placed it beside his head, and kissed his ear. Later that week, we had a small gathering for Shannon's birthday. Just family, and a few close friends. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, and the grill smoked with burgers and corn. Hope toddled between guests, her dress covered in grass stains, hair in little puffs from the heat. Toby stayed close to the steps, watching everything but staying off the lawn. A few guests brought him treats. He sniffed each one carefully before eating. He didn't beg. He didn't bark. He simply existed at the edge of the celebration. Part of it, but apart from it. When the candles were blown out and the kids ran off with sparklers, Shannon sat on the porch steps beside him. "You've seen so much," she said. "How do you carry it all?" He laid his head against her knee and closed his eyes. The next morning, Lily asked if she could take him for a walk. She'd done it before, always careful and gentle. I watched from the porch as she clipped his leash and led him slowly down the driveway. They made it to the corner before he stopped and sat. She crouched beside him, talked for a moment, then turned and walked him home. "He was tired," she said when they came back. "So we came back early." "You did the right thing," I told her. School started officially the next Monday. Max had moved up to middle school, excited but nervous. Lily, now in 6th grade, had chosen Toby as the subject for her personal narrative essay. She worked on it every afternoon, reading each paragraph aloud to him as she wrote it. Ty helped her edit. One evening, I came in to find them all in the sunroom. Lily was reading, Ty was nodding, and Toby was curled beside Hope, who had fallen asleep with one hand tangled in his fur. "She's using some big words," Ty whispered. "She gets that from her mom," I whispered back. September arrived with cooler nights and earlier sunsets. The first leaves began to change. Hope's vocabulary grew. She called Ty T. She called Shannon Mama. She called Max and Lily by full names, always with a little proud grin like she knew she was getting it right. And she called me Dada. The first time she said it, I was holding her in the kitchen, trying to cut grapes in half. She tapped my cheek and said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Dada. Shannon looked up from the sink and caught my eye. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just kissed Hope's forehead and kept cutting. That weekend, we took a drive to the apple orchard. It was a family tradition. We'd missed it the previous year, right in the thick of everything. This time we brought Hope, wrapped in a sweater and perched on Shannon's hip. Toby walked beside us, slow but steady. He didn't chase any birds, didn't sniff every corner like he used to, but he watched. Every moment, every movement, like he was memorizing it. Ty picked the best apples, even brought an extra bucket so we could make cider. Lily took pictures. Max climbed the lower branches, showing off. Hope giggled every time someone handed her a slice. At one point, Shannon whispered, "We're really doing it. We're really a family." I nodded. We always were. We stopped at a pumpkin stand on the way back. Hope chose a tiny white one, barely bigger than her hands. Toby sniffed it and sneezed. That night, as I tucked in the kids and dimmed the lights, I paused at the doorway of the sunroom. Toby was there, lying on the rug. Hope was asleep in her crib, one arm draped over her bunny. The room was quiet. I stepped closer and sat on the floor beside him. "You tired, bud?" I asked. He didn't lift his head, just blinked at me, slow and calm. "You don't have to keep watch every second, you know. You've earned a break." He turned slightly, resting his chin on my shoe. For the first time in months, I realized I hadn't checked the locks that night, hadn't walked the yard, hadn't worried. He had. He always had. I stayed there until Shannon came looking. She sat beside me, leaned her head against my shoulder. "He's getting older," she whispered. "We all are. But he still watches. And we're still here." Outside, the wind rustled the trees. Inside, the house breathed softly. Toby closed his eyes, but his ears twitched once more at the sound of Hope shifting in her crib. Still ready, still listening, still needed. October blew in with chilly mornings and the sharp scent of wood smoke. The trees that lined our street had started their transformation, painting the sidewalks with red and gold. Lily insisted we decorate the porch early this year. Shannon brought out the old Halloween bin, and soon our railing was wrapped in orange lights, paper bats hanging from the windows. Toby sat in his usual spot beside the door, occasionally eyeing the decorations as if to say, "Again with this?" Hope was fascinated by the pumpkins. She tried to pick up the biggest one 3 times before settling on sitting beside it and babbling as if it could talk back. She'd grown bolder lately, testing her limits, wandering a little farther from us in the yard before turning to check that Toby was behind her. He always was. Ty had joined the after-school woodshop club and started working on a toy chest for Hope's room. Max was back in his usual rhythm, juggling school and soccer, and Lily was knee-deep in planning her class's Halloween skit. Life had become full again. Not loud, exactly, but layered. Lived in. One Friday evening, while Shannon was reading bedtime stories and I was cleaning up after dinner, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a man standing on the porch with a clipboard. "Mr. Delaney?" "Yes?" "I'm Scott Hawthorne. I'm with the State Family Services Division." My pulse quickened. "Is there a problem?" "No, nothing urgent. I'm here for a routine follow-up regarding your guardianship case. May I come in?" I showed him to the living room. He didn't remove his jacket, but glanced around carefully, like he was filing everything away in his mind. Toby came in and sat between us. "Is that the dog?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "He looks older in person." "He's been through a lot." He nodded and flipped through his folder. "I've read through the case files. Quite the journey. I'm just here to update the report and make sure everything's in order." I answered his questions one by one. Household schedule, doctor visits, Hope's progress, Ty's current placement. He listened, took notes, asked a few clarifying things, then closed his folder. "She seems well adjusted," he said. "And from what I've heard from her caseworker and the hospital staff, she's made remarkable strides." "She's resilient," I said, "but she didn't do it alone." He looked at Toby. "That part of the story still amazes people." "It amazes us too." "I've visited dozens of homes," he said, standing. "Most folks do the best they can, some better than others, but I've never seen a case quite like this." He paused near the door. "If all continues on track, we'll be moving forward with the formal adoption recommendation by the end of November." I nodded. "Thank you." He left without shaking my hand, just a nod, a glance at Toby, and then the door closing behind him. When Shannon came downstairs, I told her everything. She sank onto the couch, her eyes glassy. "So close now," she whispered. "Almost there." We didn't talk much the rest of the night, just sat together, Toby at our feet, the quiet hum of the dishwasher filling the space. The next morning, Lily found Toby limping again. Not a big limp, just a hitch in his step when he first stood. We gave him half a pain chew and let him rest in the sunroom. Hope came over and lay beside him, resting her cheek on his side. "He okay?" she asked. "Just a little sore," I told her. She nodded, satisfied with that. That afternoon, we went to the fall festival at the town green. Toby came too, his pace slow but steady. The kids entered the pie-eating contest, and Hope painted her first tiny pumpkin with blue dots and streaks of glitter. She held it like it was gold. Pastor Mike stopped by our booth with Mrs. Clark. "You folks planning to come to the Thanksgiving service?" he asked. "Wouldn't miss it," Shannon said. "Well, there might be something special lined up," he added, glancing at Toby. Later, we learned the town council was planning to honor Toby with a little plaque at the church garden where Hope had first been found. Ty didn't say much when he heard, just nodded and said, "He deserves it." In the days that followed, Toby began sleeping more during daylight. He still rose at night, still walked the perimeter, but his energy had changed. Not faded exactly, just reserved. One evening, I walked into the nursery to find Ty reading to Hope. Toby lay near the crib, eyes closed. Ty glanced up. "Can we do a ceremony when the adoption goes through?" he asked. "Like what?" "Just us. Family. Not public. I want her to know it was real. That she was wanted." "She'll know. But I want to say it out loud." I nodded. "We'll do it. However you want." Halloween came with costumes and laughter. Hope went as a bumblebee. Toby wore black and yellow streamers on his collar. The kids paraded through the neighborhood. People stopped to take pictures. One woman asked if she could paint Toby's portrait. "Only if he gets final approval," I joked. That night, after the candy had been sorted and Hope had fallen asleep on the couch, we sat on the porch watching the last stragglers head home. Toby was curled beside Shannon's feet. "I don't think I've ever loved anything like this," she said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. In the distance, an owl hooted. The trees whispered in the wind. Inside, our children slept. Outside, our guardian rested. And in that stillness, we waited. For papers, for words, for time to wrap itself around the life we'd built and give it a name. But Toby already knew. He always had. The official adoption date landed on the third Tuesday of November, just days before Thanksgiving. It was a gray morning, the sky heavy with low clouds, and the trees bare but beautiful, their branches like quiet arms reaching out. We dressed carefully that morning. Ty wore his new button-up, still stiff at the collar. Max and Lily dressed themselves without reminders, unusually quiet, and Hope wore a pale yellow dress with little sunflowers embroidered along the hem. Shannon packed tissues in her coat pocket without saying why. We all knew. Toby moved slower than usual, but stood by the door, tail thumping softly when we stepped out. He didn't need a leash anymore. He never strayed. The courthouse was warm inside, too warm, and smelled faintly of paper and wax. A few other families were waiting, nervous, hopeful. The judge was a broad-shouldered man with soft eyes. He greeted us like we were the only ones in the building. He asked Ty if he'd like to stand with us. Ty didn't hesitate. Hope sat on Shannon's hip, one hand tangled in her hair, the other clutching the tiny white pumpkin she'd carried around since the orchard trip. When the judge read the final decree and said the words, "It is hereby ordered and decreed," Shannon's breath caught. My hand found hers. Lily sniffed. Max smiled like he was trying not to. Ty stood still, eyes on Hope. Toby lay at her feet, chin resting on the floor. She didn't understand the ceremony. She didn't know what a decree meant, but when the room clapped softly and the judge offered us congratulations, she reached out to Ty and said, "T." He picked her up and held her close. Outside the courthouse, we took photos. Shannon with Hope, me with all 3 kids, then one with everyone, and Toby in front, as always, like the keystone in a long, careful arch. We didn't throw a party. Instead, we drove back to the church. The garden had been tidied for the season, the bushes trimmed, the walkway swept clean. In the far corner, a small metal plaque had been placed beside the bush where Hope had first been found. It read, "In this place, on a winter's day, a dog waited. A child lived. A family began." There wasn't a crowd, just a few close friends. Pastor Mike said a short prayer. Mrs. Clark placed a bouquet of winter flowers beside the plaque. The kids stood close together. Shannon knelt beside Toby and whispered something into his ear. He licked her hand. Ty stepped forward, holding Hope. "She was never really lost," he said, voice quiet. "She was just waiting for all of us to catch up." We went home after that. The house felt warmer, fuller. The next few days passed in a blur of Thanksgiving prep. Shannon made her mother's stuffing recipe. Lily helped with the pie. Max set the table twice just to make sure the forks matched. Ty worked on finishing the toy chest, sanding the last edges and staining it a soft honey brown. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and crisp. We made pancakes. Hope fed half of hers to Toby under the table. He didn't even have to move. She just leaned down and dropped the pieces into his waiting mouth. Our neighbors came by later. Pastor Mike delivered a casserole and a stack of extra napkins. The house filled with smells and sounds, laughter in the kitchen, music playing low in the background, Toby's nails tapping softly on the floor as he moved from room to room. That night, after everyone had left and the dishes were done, I stepped onto the back porch. The air was sharp with cold. Frost clung to the grass. Toby sat on the top step, looking out into the yard. "You tired, old man?" I asked. He blinked, slowly. I sat beside him. "You did good." He looked at me, then turned back to the yard. I didn't speak again, just sat with him. After a while, he laid his head on my knee. The next morning, we woke up to soft light streaming through the windows. Hope stirred in her crib. Shannon got up first. She walked to the sunroom where Toby usually slept. He was lying in his spot, curled tightly, his body still. She called me softly. When I came in, I knew. His eyes were closed. His breathing had stopped. But there was no pain in his face. Just peace. His paws were tucked close. His body curled like he'd fallen asleep watching over her. Hope woke moments later. She toddled into the room, saw him, and walked over without a sound. She placed her little white pumpkin beside him and kissed his ear. We buried him under the maple tree in the yard, the one with the swing Ty had built. The kids helped dig the earth. Shannon wrapped his favorite blanket around him. Max carried the white pumpkin. Lily read the essay she'd written about him in school. Ty placed the toy chest beside the swing afterward. Said it felt right. We didn't speak much that day. We didn't need to. That night, the house felt different. Not empty, just quieter, like it was listening. Hope didn't cry. She carried her rabbit around, stopped by the back door a few times, looking out toward the swing. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. The space Toby had filled didn't shrink. It stretched. But so did we. On the first snow of December, Hope pointed to the window and said, "Toby, watch." We looked outside. Nothing there, just snow falling, gentle and slow. But we believed her. We always would.